We're here to talk about some housing measures that, we need to stay housed in Oakland. Not
Yeah.
only are we trying to stay alive, but we're trying to really look at housing here in Oakland. And maybe for folks who don't know, you could share a little bit about Causa Justa Just Cause. And to be very clear, Causa Justa Just Cause, CJJC, has been a partner of Oakland Rising for 14 years, as part of the crew of folks about 15, 16 years ago who got together and were like, we need a civic engagement organization to really push for policies and budgets at a city level that we're going to be in service to racial, economic, environmental justice. And so, but maybe folks need to know a little bit about what CJJC is and what do you all do and all of that.
Yeah, so CJC has been around for a minute. We technically just had our anniversary last year, but it actually was our 11th, COVID, all that stuff. But yeah, so I've been with the org it'll be 3 years in February. And what got me to come here, one, is just like the commitment to the base of folks that we have. CJJC is committed to a Black and Brown unity framework committed to Black and Brown working class, Black and Brown folks in Oakland. We also have an office in San Francisco. So we work on both sides of the bay. And, primarily, and this is interesting that we're going to be talking about Measure V/Just Cause, because basically that's how CJJC came into fruition,
Right.
as our name is Just Cause. Right. So like in 99, I believe it was, CJJC was leading on trying to get Just Cause eviction protections implemented in the city of Oakland. And that ended up passing in 2002. But CJJC were on the front lines of making sure that Oakland got eviction protections passed, because I guess prior to that, around like the .com boom, like rents were just skyrocketing, and landlords just wanted to be like, you know what, we could get so much money for these places now because tech folks were moving in. And, our founding members and directors were like, actually, no, we're not taking that. We need to be able to have affordable places to live. And also, folks should not be getting evicted with no cause, which is how you have just cause, right? That like landlords have to actually have reason to be kicking folks out. And so that's how the inception of the org started. Since then, Causa Justa has also been working around community rights, immigrants' rights work, making sure that the cities implemented like sanctuary cities, and just fighting for justice for our folks constantly. So, yeah.
And I think like, it sounds easy because it's like, I know the work that went into actually thinking of the title, right? Just Cause. And like, that as in some, not, I wouldn't say it's a movement, but it's definitely a segment of like the housing movement, right? And housing for all. And so what is Just Cause? Like, what are the ways in which landlords can evict people, or were able to evict people before? Because it was rampant, and I have to say I was a victim to some of this, right? Because the current Just Cause laws. So if you could go over a little bit of that, and then so that folks get a little bit of that context, and then we could then talk a little bit about what this new ballot measure will be doing to extend that.
Yeah. So as I said before, right, like landlords would just be busting into people, like thousands of people a year were being evicted, and they would just come and be like, basically like, you have to be out in 30 days. And it could be like any reason, right? Like you decided you didn't want to re-sign a lease, they're evicting you, right? Instead of giving you, like most places in most cities give you after a year, give you a month-to-month rent option, right? Like that wasn't the case initially. and you could just be evicted for not signing a lease. And to
Or they didn't offer you one. I think they like to put it on the
right,
record and said that, we didn't sign it, but actually they didn't offer one, because they didn't do that to me.
right,
They were like, we're just not going to sign a new lease, so bye.
right, yeah, and they could just be like, well, we didn't, yeah, we don't want to offer you a new lease, but this is an excuse in a way. You know, also we see a lot, and had seen a lot back then before a lot of the protections, is that landlords were just like straight up harassing people to get them out, like not
Right.
fixing issues in apartments to get people out, and just ways of just forcing folks out so then they can, you know, do a little bit of turnaround and then getting thousands of more dollars for folks to move into places, right? Like this point right now, like I think it's like 85% of people in the city are paying like over $2,000 a month for rent, which is pretty high considering that.
That sounds low to me. Like, that's
That sounds low to you,
because I'm like, shit, I think I'm paying that much for where I live.
yeah,
and I know that they're paying way more.
Well, there are people paying way more, yes, right? Like I think the average, maybe almost the average, is like 2,800, which is close to 3,000, which is ridiculous, right? And especially considering when folks don't have, right, like the median income in Oakland is like super low. Do you remember what it's like?
I think that I feel like I don't want to be wrong about this number, so let me actually look that up while you're talking.
We can find it, but it's like the median income is super low for folks to be paying $3,000 a month for rent.
Median income in Oakland is 40,000.
Oh, I was gonna say 45, but yeah, $40,000, right? And so
that's
there's like you make $40,000 a year,
and like divide that by 3, because your rent should be only a third of your income, right?
Right. So you have people who are making $40,000 a year, and rent is clearly, you know, over more than half, like basically like almost your whole income, right?
Yeah, so your rent should be about 1,300.
Right. It should be about 13
for an individual that makes 40,000 a year.
40,000. Yeah. So basically, I've lost what I was saying. But so this is what was happening, right? Like just like whatever, you're only paying, let's say you were actually paying a third of, you know, what you should be paying. You're only paying 1,300, but I can get you out and get somebody else in here that is going to very well pay triple that amount because of the, like we said, .com boomers who were coming in. And so this was Just Cause like played a really crucial role in the ongoing efforts to prevent displacement and homelessness in the city of Oakland, right? Because people were just constantly being evicted and didn't have anywhere to go. It's like if you get evicted from your place and rents are skyrocketing in every building around the city and you have a lack of affordable housing, like where are you going to go, right? So that's basically how Just Cause came to fruition, because not only the folks who working at Causa Justa like are working with our members in our base, right? But we are also our constituency, right? Like it's not like we're over here just balling and like, you know, live and do, you know, we're not living like we're tech bros or whatever. Excuse me if that's anyone, but
let's be real though, right? But in Oakland, what? Oakland is 60% renters.
Yeah, 60%.
Yeah, so the majority of Oakland are renters, and so when we think about like who's really impacted by this, it's not a small number of people, right? It's like a huge number.
It's
so
basically everyone, right, is affected by this.
Like, how many of you who are on this, who are joined us, like how many of you are renters? I'd love to hear from how many folks have joined us, our renters here in Oakland. If you could put that in the chat, that would be great. And so the Just Cause laws, though, only covered certain buildings, right? It didn't cover everybody.
Yeah, so initially, it was like only covered in buildings to 1980, and then when we got Just Cause passed, and then CJJC, other groups have been continually fighting to get the protections extended, and throughout the years we got it to buildings being protected that were built into 1995.
Right.
But with Measure V, when Measure V passes, an election day, right, we will get protections to buildings within 10 years. And I say within 10 years and not just a year, because every year it like increases a year. So from now, if it gets passed, that means any building, I'm going to mess up the math, 2012. I was going to say 2002. But any building.
It's an easy number, 10.
Right, I know. But it's easy for everyone, Liz. Dang, no.
Sorry.
Within 10 years, no. 10 years, any building that was built in 2012 and backwards. So
2012 to 2022.
Yes, for 2012 to 2022 are buildings that are not protected, but any building built past that, like in the before then, will all be protected by Just Cause eviction protections, which is
so now it takes people from, it sounds like it takes people from 1995 to 2012 who weren't protected before, now protected.
Right, and so that's about, we say about 10,000 additional units of folks who will be protected under the new Just Cause eviction protections, which is a rack of people.
Huge.
Right.
That's a huge number.
Right, so 10,000 folks who are not protected will now be protected once we get it passed.
Right.
And
then,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and included in that, one of the things we really like to talk about is that, like, educators and students and parents of children, obviously, will not be evicted during the school year, which is like a great added thing for Measure V.
No, I just imagine like children not being evicted, but their parents were. And they're like in their home, like, oh,
right.
Sneaking their parents in. But like, that just played out really silly in my mind. Sorry. But yeah, that's great. And so it doesn't matter. There's no exemptions on that, right?
No, there's no exemptions on that. So if you were a teacher, educator, you are covered by this, and you will not be evicted during the school year, which, some people may be like, oh, like, whatever, they can just get evicted any other time. And it's like, well, one, like we said, you have to have like reason to evict someone. And two, just imagine if you are a teacher and or, a parent, student, and being evicted, number one, is hard. As you say, you were evicting. It's hard. It's to try to find somewhere else to go, but trying to give your child stability, and like figuring out like where they are, schools, how, like, if you're going to live in the neighborhood of your school, just giving kids stability in general, right? It's super important. And so this actually protects the fact that, like, from August through June, right? Like,
right,
you will be protected and not evicted.
And
go ahead.
No, finish out your thing. I wanted to share.
Yeah, I just think that this is a great aspect to the protections, but also we think about, like, there are mad schools, right, that are up for closing, right? And a part of that, because they're like, well, we don't have money to fix them, blah, blah, blah. And, a big part of that is because folks are being displaced, and they're saying that, like, numbers are low. And it's like, well, if folks are being displaced and pushed out and have to go live, outside of Oakland, right, then we don't have those numbers of students like in our schools that actually want to be in Oakland and be in our schools or are from Oakland, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the argument, right? But I mean, school closures, like their argument around attendance is and like enrollment is bogus too, because you support charter schools. I think we have like some, I don't know,
Right. Well,
ginormous amount of charter schools, so that's part of it too.
I was saying I'm not going to even talk about charter schools, but
But I will. So so like my story, I have two. One is like when I got evicted, like I had 30 days to move out. And I, for the first time in my life, actually had to go and get on some anxiety medication because the amount of stress it was at that moment to like go and find a new place to live was incredible. Like I barely found the place that I moved into now. And I'm so thankful for my community of people because they helped me find this place. And my landlord now, through the kindness of their heart, was willing to actually give me rent that was right below market, which I could afford. And and I was contemplating leaving Oakland for the first time because of this. I mean, I left to go to Korea and like to live outside the country and all that kind of stuff, but like to be able to stay in Oakland, like it would have been, it was so, I had hair falling out, like it was bad. Like I was barely sleeping because I was just so anxiety ridden with what that move meant. I was thinking about like splitting my family. Like my mom was gonna go live on someone's couch, and my kids and I were gonna go like just stay on somebody else's couch. Like it was like that. Like I was thinking about what that really meant for our family. It was very hard. And we luckily, our lease was kind of like right before the school year, but I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like to have that happen to us during the school year. Right. And my younger one, Senna, one time she came home and she was just talking about like how she's kind of being bullied at school, like what it sounded like to me that they were being bullied. And when I kind of pressed her on it, I was like, what is this really about? What's happening? She said, well, she's a fighter like me, so I was kind of shocked that she wasn't fighting back, because I give my kids like permission to fight back when they're being pushed into a corner. She was like, well, when I really thought about it and I know what they're going through. And I was like, what do you mean? She was in third grade when she said this to me. She was like, because I learned that she's unhoused. And it broke my heart, it broke my heart to think about like what that meant, and that my child had the compassion to extend that to her friend and understand that it wasn't personal. But I think about the stress of that. Like I think about the stress of like being a parent and thinking about, God, why am I crying? I felt that in my body. I'm not going to make excuses. I felt that in my body. Like the stress of being a parent and what that means to lose housing and the stability that you want to really give your children and you can't because of circumstances.
Yeah, and then like you said, it plays out, right, in every aspect of kids' lives in terms of their, right, like what happened with Senna, and then also like educational achievement or whatever, right? Like,
right.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and like that, what that means. And so when I saw that as part of Measure V, I was really excited. I was like, wow, I'm so glad they put that in there.
Right.
And what an innovative way to use law and policy to actually impact very clearly people's lives.
Yeah.
To protect them.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding too is that it also protects people that are living in RVs. Can you share a little bit about that too?
Yeah. So part of the protections is that if you are living in an RV Like if you were living on someone's land, you're living on someone's land or in a plot of land, you still can't be like evicted off of this portion of land that you have been renting without cause for you to be evicted or told that you have to move. So, which is another added thing, right, that hadn't been in there, or even I think even considered or thought about of folks living in recreational vehicles and or tiny.
Because they're used to, because I think it was last year that City Council helped loosen some of the restrictions on having RVs and ADUs, right? Additional dwelling units, like
Yeah,
built on people's property. Like they help to streamline it so that that can happen more quickly. But I can imagine like how folks who live there might also be not seen as tenants, right?
right. You
Yeah,
know, because which is, you know, pretty ridiculous. I think just because you live in a house that's on wheels doesn't mean that you um just just are movable, right? Or should
right,
have it means that like you also have access to stability and security. Like if you have to, like, I don't want to have to worry about driving around and trying to find a place to live and or park, or you know, or like have a stable space for my home.
right.
And gives protections for folks that they aren't just told that they have to move or get kicked off of land that they are living on.
Right. So Measure V is like way down the ballot, right? It's like there is, after that, there are only WXY. And a lot of people tend to like not go all the way down the ballot. So we're asking, making sure folks that when you're voting, go all the way down your ballot, all the different separate pages in your ballot, and make sure
Yeah,
that you're on those.
yeah, it's a lot. And right, like it is something that is important because it gives a lot more protections and stabilizing of housing for, like you said, at least 60% of our population. So,
Yeah, including you and me. So
including you and me. Yeah.
so I wanted to also see, you know, given that there are two other housing measures on the ballot, like we can also share a little bit more about those as well. So folks know there's Measure U and Measure
Cute.
Q. Yeah. So what's Measure Q? I think this is a little what it's like also one of those like people are like, why are we voting on this one? What is this? I don't understand. What's Article
Yeah.
34?
So I think Measure Q basically, what it does is it is kind of a strategy to get around this racist law, Article 34, that is still in the California like Constitution, I guess, that says that you can't create a certain level, or you can't create affordable housing without the people voting on it, basically. And so when this law was passed, it basically was a way to stop desegregation. And so Measure Q just, it helps establish the fact that there will be 13,000 affordable housing units built uh, in Oakland. And it, like I said, it gets around this sort of like every time you want to build affordable housing, you have to ask the voters. This way, we actually are saying that we are committed to building affordable housing in Oakland. And I guess it's sort of the city's commitment to keep Black and Brown, working class Black and Brown folks housed in Oakland.
Yeah, so Article 34 basically was redlining, right? It was used to make sure that at the time, majority voters were white, right, in Oakland. And so being able to have white voters be able to say and utilize the electoral system to push, low income folks out of Oakland, or keep them out. And it's a pretty stark difference when you see the redlining in play, like in Oakland, and then San Leandro was huge on redlining. So if you go down East Oakland and then you cross over what on our side is International that moves into East 14th on the other side, International used to be all East 14th, y'all. So, but when it got to Durant, it switches to San Leandro, and it's stark, the difference there. Like on one side of the street, it's like less trees, and then suddenly there's hella trees on the other side, and the way it looks very different. And the demographic shifts dramatically. It goes from being super black on one side and people of color on one side, and then very white on the other. So those kinds of laws in Oakland were also used, right? Like certain neighborhoods were, was used as a way to keep Black and brown folks out of particular neighborhoods. And so that's why historically up in the hills, we have more white folks, and, down in the flatlands are folks of color. And even though now we have more Black folks in the hills, they are also very segmented, right? It's like parts of District 5, 6, and 7, 6 and 7 more specifically. And so that's one way. And so what this does is Measure Q would just give us the authorization to build it. There's no money in it.
Right.
It just opens the door for us to do more housing and to acquire the funds now to get that money to get those housing units in.
Right.
So then the other measure is Measure U, right?
Yes, Measure U. And so basically Measure U would authorize the city to raise funds for affordable housing and for city infrastructure. But if passed, it would give $350 million out of $850 million towards affordable housing. And I think what we are very excited about is that if this passes, this gives potentially a source of funding to like future things that we've been fighting for and talking about, like the Tenant Opportunities to Purchase Act. And this could be, which can get us to be able to remove properties and or land off of the speculative market if having access to resources like this $350 million, we would be able to hopefully have access to this money, and folks would be able, like I said, to get property off the speculative market, but also can work with local land trusts to be able to
purchase that land,
this property, and to keep it, and to actually keep it affordable, right?
And so just so folks know what, there was about $18 million that Nikki Fortunato Bass, who is the council president, she helped to bring with some other city council members, I believe Carol Fife and Rebecca Kaplan. Maybe not Carol. I don't know if Carol was on the council when this got passed. I don't remember. But I know that Nikki really played a role. Councilmember Bass played a huge role in getting this $18 million in a pot of money that would go into the Community Land Trust. And what the Community Land Trust does is they buy land and they buy properties, and then basically sell the house that sits on that land to somebody. And it sits in a trust so that it's shared amongst everybody who's part of the land trust. And so that's the speculative market that we just see housing go up. People move in, buy a house, and then sell it to make a profit, or like they're flipping houses, and that drives up the price of housing, and it makes it difficult and unaffordable for the rest of us. So this takes those this would help to do that, right? Like 18 million can't go very far in Oakland anymore. Like $1 million will get you a house now. So like what we can buy 18 units. So with 300, potentially with 350 million, I'm sure that they want to use less than 350 million towards this. But even if we increase that number, we're really building that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And as far as I too, like the council is 7-0 in favor of this going through, which is exciting in the way that we think about it, like you said, to getting things off the speculative market. That is a lot of money, and like you said, yeah, houses are like one of my favorite pastimes is to look at houses online.
Me,
It just calms me. Interior, right? All of those things.
yes, all of the things.
It's like dreaming, like, oh my gosh, this would be beautiful, right? But the reality of that is like you said, I'm looking at a house and it's like $1.5 million.
Right.
And this is
Yeah.
actually the dream.
There's a house that was in my neighborhood that went up for sale, and it was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. It was probably like 900 square feet itself. The lot is not very much bigger than that. It went for 750,000. And I was like, what? That's ridiculous. So yeah, it's wild. And so being able to see that happen in our neighborhoods and what that means, and seeing the changing demographic in Oakland is startling.
Yeah, it is startling. You know, I moved to Oakland, and specifically when I moved here, I moved to West Oakland because of the rich history of the city, because of the history of, you know, the Panthers in West Oakland. And like you said, the demographics of our folks are constantly changing. And, you know, I want to live in a space where I can see my people, and or, you know, other POC. Like, you know, I just want to live in a space where I can really build community with folks and have that. You know, I grew up in a community like that, that my family lived in for, I mean, we were raised there to 3rd generation, I guess. But, you know, that means something to me, to have a community, to have being connected to your neighbors. And I think being able to have access to affordable housing and or even like purchasing through a land trust gives you a sense of community and establishes that, where it isn't just constantly new folks or rolling over and who
That's
can
right.
them out, you know, like
who can make the most money off our city, right?
you know.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think we could talk about this forever, right? Like what the history of that means, and the impact on our communities, and all of that. And so these 3 measures are just 3 measures, 3 ways that we can help keep some folks housed in Oakland, and keep our Black and Brown communities here, and be able to keep the rich history of, you know, who is here, and for folks who want to stay here be able to stay here, right? I think that's one of the biggest critical pieces, is that you know, I think a lot of folks with privilege who are coming in think that it is a matter of choice where people get to live, because that's their privilege, right? They get to have the privilege of choosing where they live because they can afford it, or that it is created for them to be able to afford. Whereas other folks who don't have choice, we don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. I might not be able to move from where I live now because I can't afford anywhere else in the moment. And so then the cost of living and all of the things. And so, and I make a good income. I think I make a good income for what I do, you know? And so, anyway, I just really appreciate you, Shakeeta, for joining us.